Dr. Osnat and Dr. Sophie Savelkouls of WestEd will use video examples to explore 5 core early math teaching practices. They will introduce 4 video guides developed through the Early Math Initiative and discuss ways that early math trainers and coaches can use them to support early math teaching practices. Join Osnat and Sophie in Breakout Room 2 for watching M5 in action, 5 core early math teaching practices.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our presentation, Watching M to the 5th in Action, 5 Core Early Math Teaching Practices. I'm Osnat from WestEd. With me is my colleague, Sophie.
Hi, I'm Sophie, also from WestEd.
Thank you. And in today's session, we will introduce you to an early math framework, which we call M to the 5th Early Math Practices. The M to the 5th practices consist, of course, of 5 core early math teaching practices for teachers to implement in their ECE settings. To help you make sense of this framework and to show you how it is being utilized, WestEd has created 4 video guides where we illustrate and discuss the M to the 5th practices in action. And in today's session, we'll introduce you to both the M to the 5th early math practices and the 4 video guides illustrating the practices. Before we move on, we just wanted to make sure we acknowledge that these video guides were created as part of the California Early Math Initiative, which has at its mission to improve math and science outcomes for children ages birth to 8 across the state of California. It is led by Fresno County Superintendent of Schools and through partnership with the California Early Math Initiative, Ames Center for Math and Science Education, WestEd, and the State Board of Education, and Les Mayfield. So before we dive in and talk about the video guides and the M to the 5th practices, we would like to start by inviting you to watch a video. This is a snippet of a video that we actually used in the video guide. And as you watch the video, we invite you to notice any math concepts that are being explored as part of the video. How the materials allow children to explore these math concepts. So what kind of objects or materials do you notice in the environment? And if you notice any math language, math vocabulary that the teacher is using, write it down.
Open, twist, 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 open. Yummy. Look at Yola sitting inside that little tub. That's funny. Yeah, he sat in a little tub. Sometimes we sit in the big tubs. Do you want that on? Do you want to come into a tub? They put the little tubs inside the big tubs. Just be careful of his head, okay? Is there room for 2 boys in a tub? Okay, Sophia's using that right now. Yeah. Maybe Azaria would like a cup. Okay. Rub-a-dub-dub. 2 boys in a tub. Yeah. Yes. And rub-a-dub-dub, 1 Betsy in a tub.
The video illustrated some math concepts and skills that children have explored through their interaction with Christine, with the teacher. You may have noticed a reference to number words and the use of vocabulary related to counting or to numbers like 1 ball, 2 balls. There was a lot of spatial relationships in the video where the teacher was referring to the tabs and where the children are in relation to the tabs, in the tabs, outside the tab. One is inside the little one is inside the larger one. Classification was more subtle. We've seen a child collecting the same kind of balls and putting them in her purple bowl. And there was some problem solving with the child trying to open a jar and going to the teacher as part of this larger video. And the teacher is helping her by showing her the actions of twisting and helping her how to open the lid to get the jar open. The child is filling up the jar and then closing it, and then it's repeating into the larger video in the guide where the child is coming over to the teacher to help for help with opening and closing the jar. So why do we show you all of this? Sophie is going to take us to our agenda, where you'll see how we are referring to these videos throughout our session today.
So in today's session, we will start off by introducing you to the 4 early math video guides. But in doing so, we will also explain to you a little bit about why we believe video can be such a powerful tool for teachers in building their teaching practices. Next, we will review the M to the 5th early math practices with you, but through the lens of 2 videos, one of which you've already just watched. And then finally, we will walk you through one of our M to the 5th video guides to show you how you could use this in your own teaching or in your work with other educators. So to start off, I'm sure you can all agree that videos are a very powerful tool for bringing practices to life. So videos allow educators to observe and unpack what practices can look like in early care settings. They can also help educators implement some new practices in their own setting. And teachers can also benefit from some time to reflect on their own practices after watching some of these videos examples. Now, as we have mentioned, WestEd has created 4 separate video guides which use videos because we think they are such a powerful tool for teachers. And using these videos, we try to illustrate the M to the 5th early math practices in action. So each video guide is structured in a similar way, but it focuses on a different age group. So the first video guide focuses specifically on supporting infants and their early math practices. The second video guide focuses on toddlers, and the remaining 2 video guides focus on supporting preschoolers' early math. Each video guide includes a video similar to what you just watched, illustrating ECE teachers supporting children's early math. And then the video guides unpack these early math teaching practices observed in the video and offer some opportunities for reflection near the end. So these video guides were designed to support professional development providers, which could include coaches, and in facilitating discussion and also in reflecting with other educators. Now, before we review these video guides in more detail, we would like to invite you to watch a second video. The second video is of teacher Maritza, and she's engaging in some early math with a preschool girl in her classroom. And again, as you watch this video, we would like you to pay attention to a few things. First of all, pay attention to some of the math concepts that are being explored. Also, if you could pay attention to some of the materials that teacher Maritza has put out for the children and that the children are engaging in. And lastly, we invite you to pay attention to some of the math language that teacher Maritza is using, but also that the child is using in her as she is engaging with these materials.
So my daddy is that tall.
Your daddy is that tall? Okay.
And mama is that tall.
So your daddy is this tall, your mommy is this tall,
And
you are this tall. And who is this tall? You have anybody in your family that could be that tall?
Yeah.
Who?
My cousin Alexa's baby.
Your cousin Alexa's baby could be the smallest one.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so this is cousin Alexa's baby. That's you? What are this
So
one?
that's my brother Chente.
And
And
how
that's
about-
my brother Gio.
That's your brother Gio. And which one is Gio? Oh, that one. Are you younger than brother Gio?
No.
No? Are you shorter than brother Gio?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, and how
I'm
about,
gonna make
who could be this tall in your family?
Charlie.
Charlie? Charlie younger than you? Smaller than you? Yeah?
He's like short.
Charlie is short?
Yeah.
So he's shorter than you. Yeah?
So as you were watching this video, you may have noticed that teacher Maritza was exploring several math concepts and skills with the child in the video. So you might have noticed that teacher Maritza and the girl were exploring comparisons of size. So both the girl and Maritza used vocabulary like short, shorter, shortest to describe the size of the different towers. They were also starting to explore ordering. So as the girl was comparing the height of her family members, she was ordering the blocks from taller to slightly shorter. And then later on in this interaction, in a video clip that we weren't able to show you today, you will see Maritza and a child go on to use these unit cubes, but instead as a way to measure their hands and as a way to measure their fingers. And through that, they're using skills like problem solving to figure out whose hand is longest. So you may be wondering what some of the strategies are that teacher Maritza and teacher Christine used to introduce certain math concepts and skills to the children in their setting. And so WestEd has created a framework to help teachers understand some of the strategies that these particular teachers were using to help support children's early math learning. And Osnat will walk you through this framework next.
Thank you, Sophie. So the M to the 5th framework is really highlighting for us what are some core math teaching practices, early math teaching practices teachers can use in order to support children's early math learning. They can be used in the context of these videos, like Sophie said, when we are viewing a video and trying to make sense of what is it that the teacher is doing to really help guide the learning related to math. But it could be an approach or a framework that can be used in different contexts in order to help teachers identify those core components in the practice that together would help promote math learning with children. So we will, in the next part of this session, we are going to take a closer look at the different elements in the framework, the 5 different practices. We will start with mutual learning, and then we will visit the other M's in the M to the 5th framework, the multiple experiences component or practice, materials and learning environment, meaningful math interactions, and lastly, math language. So as you have seen in our diagram, mutual learning is at the center, and it's really at the heart of supporting children's learning. It is a foundational practice because as much as children learn from adults, the educators learn from children, right? They observe them and listen carefully during interactions. They pay attention to where the child is developmentally, what is the level of understanding, and in this particular case, for the math concept. Do they speak another language? Or do they convey their understanding of a concept using words in a different language? Are there any concepts that are just emerging? How can we support their learning of math vocabulary as they are developing their understanding? All of this is happening as the teacher observes the child while interacting, sometimes just observing from the side and listening carefully to what the child is saying or doing. Then they use what they learn to build on individual children's strength, to understand their needs, to learn about their interests, right? And then these are always invitations to integrate children's interests, their home language, and the culture they bring into the environment and into the learning experiences. So in our exploration of the 5 math practices, teaching practices, we are going to refer to the videos and learn about how the teachers, teacher Christine and the teacher Maritza, have utilized these early math teaching practices. So Sophie, as we think about the video with the infants room with Christine, how would you say she exercised mutual learning?
So you may have noticed that when the children were exploring their environment, Christine was observing each individual child and how that child interacted with the different objects in the environment, as well as with their peers. So for an example, when Christine noticed that Yolo was interested in sitting inside the small little tub, she then decided to introduce the big tubs. Then a few children started to go inside the big tubs, and this is when Christine described what the children were doing and introduced some math vocabulary. So she said they put the little tubs inside the big tubs. Osnat, what about teacher Maritza? What did she use? What did she do to support mutual learning?
I would say that Maritza was really present with the child and have engaged in asking her questions and restating sometimes what the child was sharing to really understand where the child is when she refers to, when she uses words of measurement, where is her level of understanding, what is emerging, how she can support her. When the child showed interest in using the towers to represent the relative heights of her family members, Maritza really used this opportunity to continue to compare heights and model the use of comparative language. When she asked her, so your daddy is this tall, your mommy is this tall, and you are, so helping her, kind of repeating what the child was sharing and helping her frame it within a context of comparisons and ordering to see where the child is going to go with that. And not only that, she's learning about the child's family and making, connections to the child's family members in a very authentic way, while she's building on the child's strength, knowledge of her family, use of vocabulary, and helping her with areas of growth as she's developing her understanding of comparative language. Our next math practice is called multiple experiences, and it's really about offering children many different opportunities to experience and learn about math concepts. Children don't learn just from single opportunities, and they really benefit from having many different ways of exploring a concept, whether it's in different areas of the classroom, over different days, over time. They need that ubiquity. They need those many different examples in a variety of settings. This might happen as part of children's play. It could be part of routines. Mealtime is a perfect time to discuss math concepts. And then teachers, of course, also intentionally plan a range of early math learning experiences that are developmentally appropriate and that are set to support children's early math learning. So when we refer to multiple opportunities, we refer to this type of opportunities that teacher identified throughout the day to support children's learning, and it can take place, as I said, in different times, at different places. Sophie, as we think about Christine, how did she provide children in her learning environment to explore math concepts through different experiences?
So in this particular example, we see that Christine used these indoor playtime as a way to explore these math concepts with infants. So what she did is she invited infants to explore concepts like size, quantity, position, and even volume. For example, she talks about empty and full. And so Christine really allowed the children to explore the materials on their own first, but then she used strategies like teacher talk, such as describing events, or verbally labeling some of the objects to provide this early language support during these experiences that are so rich. And by doing this, she made these math concepts more visible. Osnat, how did Maritza use multiple experiences to support children's early math?
So for Maritza, like for Christine, it was also indoor. And it was during playtime, or I think in the preschool classroom, in this particular one, they call it choice time, where children go into different centers or different activity tables. And here we have seen an activity with unit blocks. The child created structures of different height, and the teacher invited the child to compare the structures. And of course, as we mentioned, using comparative language. But this could be a beginning of a series of experiences that the teacher is offering the child to continue to develop measurement concept. And this is where we really put an emphasis on multiple. That particular experience can really generate more ideas for the teacher and for the child for continuing to measure using unit blocks or other items, to continue to discuss height or distance, and to compare across different height or distance or other measures across different objects. So one experience is not enough, but many build children's understanding over time to really have a deeper ideas and understanding of the math concepts. Our next one is really one we have asked you to pay attention to, and we showed you both videos, and you may have taken some notes on what you have seen in the videos as far as materials and objects in the learning environment that can promote mathematical exploration. We know that, especially for young children, learning is hands-on and involves physical objects, and certain materials in the classroom environment are more likely to promote mathematical exploration. We are talking about open-ended materials. Specifically, we have seen the balls and the buckets and the unit blocks. All of these materials can be put together, taken apart, and assembled in different ways. And this is really an invitation for children to explore math concepts through these open-ended materials. Another type of materials that are really helpful in promoting children's math learning is really any kind of collections of items. And the items could be with the same size, varying in shape, varying in size. They don't need to be identical. But whenever there is a set of objects of different characteristics or similar ones, it invites children to count. It presents opportunities to sort and classify based on shape or based on size or based on color. There are many different attributes that children can use to sort, to classify. Oftentimes they'll start counting and saying how many are in a group and who has more. And as we see in the group, in the slide, they even create patterns. We see here a pattern of blue and white that the child was putting together. And again, oftentimes these are child-driven and ideas that children come up with once we offer them this type of materials. In both of these videos have illustrated how materials in the classroom environment can generate opportunities for math learning and naming using math vocabulary. So back to you, Sophie. How would you say Christine have created a math-rich learning environment using different kind of materials?
Yes, so you may have noticed that Christine actually provided many different types of materials in her classroom, and they were all open-ended materials. So, for example, you notice in this clip in particular, she used different sized tubs. So there were the small white tubs and the larger tubs. And so these really allow for children to explore concepts of size, so big and little. But you may have also noticed on the floor there were some balls, and in a clip later that we weren't able to show you today, the children were using these balls to fill up the tubs. They were using them to put through tubes. And so these balls can help children explore concepts like inside or on top, as well as empty and full, but they also can be used to do counting. So Christine here really used many open-ended play materials and provided the children with many options for the children to explore ideas and approach learning in a more creative way, and in even ways that teacher might not anticipate. So Osnat, how did Maritza use materials in her classroom?
So in that morning, children had different opportunities to explore math concepts throughout the classroom, whether it was the block area or another area with tubes. In this particular table, we have seen the unit blocks that, as I've mentioned, invite the children to explore and build in different ways. And one child took it in a direction of creating patterns. There was a child that really created a long piece of the unit cubes connected and then counted them. I think she counted beyond 60 and 70 because she was so intrigued with the counting of the unit cubes. And what we've seen with the child in the video is taking it in the direction of creating different structures of different height and making that analogy to her family members and their height, and talking about referring to the different structures with the teacher's support to talk about ordering of the different structures, who is taller, who is shorter, and who is the very little one. So all of that, I would say, is due, and it's quite rich, is with just one type of materials. You can see how far it can go in terms of engaging children in different ways to explore math concepts in a table with unit blocks. The next one is about meaningful math interactions. So let's pause for a second and think back of the different practices we have had so far. We are talking about offering of materials. We just talked about materials and how they can stimulate and spark ideas that are related to math. We have talked about the teacher providing opportunities for learning in multiple ways, right? And we also talked about the teacher being there present and observing and noticing what the child is saying or doing or is showing interest in order to be engaging with the child in a meaningful way. And this is what this practice is about. Because just setting the materials and even observing, not engaging at all can be a missed opportunity. Once you engage with the child, there is an opportunity to help them see the math, use vocabulary related to the math, explore the math in different ways. And it's really about the teachers not only being present in observing, but making judgments on how to navigate that interactions in ways that don't take over. Allow the child to lead that, follow the child lead and interest, like in this case, when the child was making the analogy to her family members, but finding a way to support the math learning. So both Sophie, Christine and Maritza have used different strategies to support children's exploration, to encourage their thinking. Why don't we hear from you, Sophie, some of the specific examples that we have seen in Christina's video on how she supported children's early math.
So you may have noticed that even though Christine was working with infants who are mostly nonverbal, she used a variety of strategies to support their exploration of math ideas, encourage their thinking, and even scaffold their conceptual development. So one example is that Christina used descriptions and labeling to describe what children were doing and the materials that they were exploring. So specifically, she said, for example, they put the little tubs inside the big tubs, describing what the children were doing at that time. But Christine also used prompts and questions as a way to further children's thinking. So one example of that would be when Yolo began to climb inside the tub with Deegan, Christine introduced math concepts related to number when she asked, is there room for 2 boys in a tub? So she really used description and open-ended questions and prompts as a way to scaffold children's thinking. Osnat, what about Maritza? Did she use similar or different strategies?
She used some similar strategies, even though we are talking about an older child. Similarly, Maritza have used different strategies. One that we have seen that also Christina used is the use of open-ended questions. She asked questions, for example, she directed the child's attention to the relative height of the different towers by asking, which one is the tallest? Oh, so this one is shorter. She's referring, kind of stating what the child is sharing, but also embedding questions to engage her in comparisons. She also modeled and scaffolded the use of comparative language. The child used the word short, but the teacher is encouraging her and modeling the use of words like shorter or shortest. She also scaffolded the child. When the child, we didn't see it in this video clip, the full one in the video guide also illustrate how the child at some point is using the unit blocks to measure the length of her hand, and the teacher is there to help her connect the units and count them together to figure out whose hand is longer, the teacher's hand or the child's hand. And they do it with the use of unit cubes. And again, this is what I call meaningful math interactions, where children are counting for a reason, where they are comparing because they were interested in finding out something, and where the teacher is there to make those statements, to scaffold the process of learning, and when she asks open-ended questions to expand the child's learning in different ways. Our last practice in the M to the 5th framework is math language. And this one is indeed last but not least, because we know that language is integral to learning. And of course, math language is integral to math learning. Educators model and encourage mathematically rich communication. And this could be with children that are verbal or non-verbal. You've seen examples from 2 different age groups where, preschool child could engage in a conversation with the teacher. The younger, the infant's room, the teacher is constantly using language, even if children are not yet at a place where they can reply using language, but they are listening, they are understanding, and they are taking it in, right? This is the beginning of making sense of math vocabulary. So what is it that the teachers are doing? They're introducing children to the math vocabulary in a very authentic way to their interactions with children as part of these playful experiences. Oftentimes, they also invite children to represent their understanding in multiple ways. So if the child, especially with the older children, or the younger ones, when the teacher is asking a question, there is no one way to communicate the answer. Children can be using body language, gestures, and they can use any language. And we need to be recognizing that as they build their math vocabulary, they may express or comprehend the concepts in English or in their home language. We have made many references so far to the kind of language both Christina and Maritza have used as part of these experiences with children. Sophie, do you want to highlight a few math vocabulary one more time that Christina have been using?
Yeah, so as you may have also noticed when you were watching the video, Christina used spatial vocabulary in many different ways. So she used spatial vocabulary to describe position or location. She said inside on when she was talking about the tubs. She used even words to describe volume when she used words like empty and full to describe how many items there were in the tubs. She used size words like little or big. And of course, she used quantity words as well, like 1, 2, or more. So one example in which she used quantity words is where when she asked, "Is there room for 2 boys in the tub?" She was asking this as 2 children were climbing in a tub as a way to introduce this new vocabulary to the infants. So Osnat, what about Maritza? What type of vocabulary did she introduce?
So if if our audience were to play it again, and I know that watching it once is sometimes difficult for attending to all the details and the specific words, but these are all part of the guide, so everyone can then watch it again. But if you take a look at the kind of vocabulary Maritza was using, we see a variety of descriptive and comparative vocabulary. So there were words like long and short to describe attributes, in this case of the structures. But they also use comparative language, shortest or shorter. And she also used gestures to help children, help the child make sense of the different terms, and also help her with the concepts of ordering. She invited the child, whenever possible, to use comparative language by asking her questions. Is Charlie shorter than you? So in asking her again about Charlie, the person that the child was mentioning as she was referring to one of the structures, the teacher is asking a question using these words. And she also quite often elaborated on the child's responses as a way of introducing relative height in different ways. So, for example, when the child said, my cousin's Alexa's baby, right? When the teacher pointed to the smallest tower, and she said, oh, this is my cousin's Alexa's baby. Maritza elaborated by saying, oh, so your cousin's Alexa's baby could be the smallest one. Again, an opportunity to introduce another word comparing size, smallest one. I think this really brings us to the fifth and the last of all the 5 practices in our framework. And next, we are going to take you to a high-level tour of our video guides so that you have a good sense of what's in the guides other than the videos. And we have just shared with you a snippet of 2 of the videos. Each of them is has a longer version within the guides. We're going to help you see the 4 main components within the guides. One is all the guides, first of all, I want to say all the guides are following the same structure. Learn about M to the 5th, watch M to the 5th in action, unpack M to the 5th, and enhancing your practice in terms of helping the viewer, the participant, make a connection between what they are viewing in the video and their own practice in their own settings. Yeah.
So in this first section, the Learn About M to the 5th section, we are providing an overview of these M to the 5th early math practices by describing specific teaching practices for each M to the 5th practice. So this is on the screen. You can see an example of how multiple experiences is described in our video guide, and some of the ways that, some of the specific teaching practices that are related to this early math practice. In Watch About M to the 5th in Action, we provide users with a video clip description as well as a video clip that's embedded in the video guides for viewers to watch. And these clips are very similar to the ones that you have already watched, but just a little bit longer. Also in this section are a few reflection questions. So we provide some open-ended questions for each of the M to the 5th practice, inviting viewers to examine and explain how some of these M to the 5th practices are illustrated in a clip. So I've provided you here with some examples of questions we have in this video guide. And so they could be questions like, in what ways did the materials promote math learning? For the video guide on infants, we ask, what open-ended questions and prompts did Christina use to encourage children's exploration of math ideas? In one of the preschool guides, we include questions like, in what ways was Maritza responsive to the children's interests, learning, and development? So these questions help viewers, as they're watching the video, to think about these early math practices. Then in our Unpack M to the 5th section, this is really where we provide some examples of how each M to the 5th practice is illustrated in the video clip in a very similar way to how we just walked you through each of the M to the 5th practices and made connections to the 2 videos that you watched. This section also includes a call-out box identifying some of the important math concepts that the teacher is supporting through her use of these M to the 5th practices. And in addition, a few of our video guides also include an interview with the teacher that's featured in the video guide, where the teacher shares some of her choices of materials and some of her choices in the way she interacted with the children in her care. Lastly, in this Enhance Your Practice section, we provide focused and open-ended questions, inviting users to reflect on how they currently support early math in their setting, but also how they can plan ways to apply some of the M to the 5th practices in their setting. So some of the reflection questions are, what are some ways you might offer opportunities for infants to explore math ideas and concepts during daily routines and play? But also questions like, how might you promote meaningful math interactions for children who are dual language learners?
Thank you, Sophie, for taking us through the different components in the 4 guides. At the top of this slide, you have the link to where you can find the 4 video guides. Again, all 4 were created by Wested as part of the Early Math Initiative. The first one is specifically focusing on early math within an infant room. We have seen Christine as part of our earlier example today. The second one is focusing on math with toddlers, and it is through a video and a segment with a child exploring ramps and balls. The next 2 are focusing on math explorations in preschool classrooms. You have seen part of the video with Maritza and the unit cubes. And the last one is specifically focusing on how math can be explored through literature. And it provides an example of teacher reading a storybook to children in a classroom and engaging them as she's reading the book in counting, adding, subtracting, and illustrating use of prompts to engage children, not only in the literature experience, but making it also a rich math learning experience. All of these guides follow the same structure that Sophie have described earlier and can be used in different ways. We invite you now to reflect on the ways in which you can use the video guides. Whether you are an educator, a coach, a trainer, the video guides provides you a resource that you can use in your own professional development or in your work with others. We would like to invite you to take a couple of seconds to reflect back on what has been shared in this session and to think about a couple of ideas or ways you can use the video guides within your own practice. Thank you, everyone. I hope you find the M to the 5th early math practice framework useful and that you can find different ways for using it, whether it's within the context of these video guides or as you are supporting yourself or others in promoting early math with young children. And we hope that you have already come up with some ideas, and I'm sure you will have more as you continue to explore the guides and make them your own in supporting your teachers or yourself or others you work with in promoting children's early math learning and development. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.